that's me. Wow, all that for that. So, how many of you are from Dayton? Or the vicinity, Miami Valley, anybody? Anybody raise their hand? No?
Cincinnati, Ellie's from Cincinnati.
Cincinnati, okay, wow, okay, all right. So how many of you have heard of a company called Procter & Gamble? If you haven't heard of them, I bet you've used their products before. So just a little bit of background about me. I actually grew up in Dayton, so I'm originally from Dayton, Ohio. I went to school, the University of Rochester in upstate New York, and got recruited to go work for Procter & Gamble my junior year summer as an intern in sales. And my primary products were laundry and cleaning products. I was a psychology major, really wanted to go into human resources, but at the time when this was in 1989-ish, there weren't a lot of opportunities for bachelor's degrees. I was interned at Xerox in their personnel area my junior year, full-time, full-year internship, where 1 day a week I would go work downtown at Xerox. And it was great, but they really were looking for people with master's degrees. So had an opportunity to interview on campus with P&G, went to intern with them, and was offered a full-time position at the end of the internship. Didn't know that I wanted to do sales, really wasn't my thing, but I was okay at communicating and selling a message, so I did do pretty well. And accepted position, worked in Boston for a year, got promoted, moved to New Jersey and New York area, got promoted. I was there for about 7 years, 1 year in Boston, 6 years in New York, New Jersey, and then came to Cincinnati my last 3 years with the company and worked in diversity recruiting and training. So what I learned on the East Coast was P&G's brands marketed very well in city-type suburban areas. So how many of you have ever seen that very large, well, now it's either the like huge 2-gallon thing of Tide that you can actually have, purchase and walk out, or the big box of, how much, so wait, now I'm really dating myself. Do you all use the pods? What do you use when you wash your clothes? And if you don't use Tide, you won't insult me, but I still have stock in the company. What do you use to wash your clothes? Pods, but what brand? Good answer. So the pods, right? So at one point, probably when you were younger, there were these very large containers of liquid laundry detergent that people would buy and take to their homes. In the city where most of my customers in New York City would go to a corner store and buy the small container and take that home and use it and then go back and get more when they needed it. So we were operating in the New York, in more of an urban market, and competing against messages that were coming out of Cincinnati that were targeted toward what we call big box stores like Sam's, Kroger, Walmart, where people drove in a car, right, to go shopping and had ability and space to store those very large, like the 16, how many of you, and I'm totally P&G language, the Bounty, have you seen those big things of Bounty? You can get like 16 rolls. So in New York City, those don't sell very well, right? So if you're going in on a day in, day out basis, buying what you need, and you don't have a lot of space. So one of the things that we struggled with from a branding perspective was the things that were coming out of Cincinnati were not targeted to our consumer. So we kind of struggled. That was one of the things, and particularly because I was from this area, so I understood the marketing behind it, but it was challenging being on the East Coast and in any of the coasts, whether you were in on the East Coast or the West Coast in markets where whether you were in Chicago, Atlanta, small stores where people really didn't drive to buy products. They actually walked or rode a bike or took the bus or the train. So you're not trying to carry those large products to your home. So that was, like, when we had this conversation, I was having like flashbacks of my P&G career. That was one of the things, particularly in the Northeast, that I struggled with. And one of the things, just from a personal perspective, I actually worked for P&G for 10 years. When I went to Cincinnati, I had an opportunity to start doing diversity work more. It was in my title. I was a diversity recruiting and training manager. And very quickly realized that I love diversity work more than I love selling Tide. So I kind of developed a strategy. I did my master's degree in New York at Fordham, which was great because the company paid for it, and really felt like it was time for me to make some transition. So I left P&G after 10 years and started my own consulting firm. And I did that in New Jersey for about 15 years. And my consulting work focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, working with schools, businesses, and community organizations, fostering better cross-cultural relationships. But what I learned very easily was my experience at Procter & Gamble, understanding how to market a brand, how to develop a brand, how to understand who your consumers are, thinking through who is your target audience. All of those things translated very well to running your own business. Even today, in my 15 months here at the University of Dayton, I have to think about who is my audience, faculty and staff, what is the message that I'm trying to get to them, why they need to work on and understand inclusive excellence, and then how do I reach them? Is it through email? Is it things that we can send in the mail? Is it having a booth in KU? Even as I think about students. So our office has launched the Aim for Community Excellence Survey. How many of you have heard about that? Ugh, that's so alarming to me. Okay, so there's a survey that you'll hear more about and should have heard a lot about that's going on campus. And the focus is on looking at how you experience University Day. And it's for everyone, it's for faculty, staff, and students. So part of what we had to think about is how do we make sure students know about this survey? It's an online instrument. It takes about 20 minutes for you to fill out. We're actually going to be with SGA. It's a PATH event Sunday evening at 8 o'clock, and there's another one Tuesday evening. I think it's at 5:30. So look for that. They're PATH events where if you come listen to information about the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, you get PATH points for that, and then we'll talk to you about what we do, and then you'll learn more about the survey. Again, that was an opportunity that we had to think about. How are we going to reach you? How are we going to reach students? And we realized that they didn't know about the survey, and they didn't fully understand what is the Office of Diversity and Inclusion all about. So figure out a way to reach the consumer. PATH events, PATH points are one way of doing that, okay? So whenever we're thinking about branding, who is my customer, where is my customer, and what's my message to get to them, okay? One of the things I want to share with you, so there was the perspective of being in the Northeast, understanding the brands that we had and how I would get a packet if we were going to launch a new flavor of Downy. I would get a marketing packet, marketing kit, had all these great pictures and all the things that we needed to go sell it, only it didn't market to my consumer. My consumer was going into what they call in New York bodegas, which is like the corner store or the small markets. And the materials that I would receive from Cincinnati they weren't applicable. They didn't help me. And my great friends in brand marketing in Cincinnati heard what we were saying, but from a cost perspective, it didn't make sense for them to develop two different types of marketing materials. One for urban areas and one for, call it, everywhere else, where people drove to the grocery store or drove to Sam's or Costco. So there was always this back and forth between them. So one, it was just from a branding perspective, how do we reach all of our consumers? And if we're gonna focus on one particular group, obviously they're gonna focus on ones where they're gonna make the most money from. They made money in our regions, but it wasn't from a standpoint of numbers and the number of folks that they could reach. They didn't develop two particular types of marketing. So just something to take in perspective. The other thing, and this is in the 1990s, and when I started with P&G in 91, so I'm looking for the clicker, okay. So, I'm talking about Pampers, and I'm gonna flip between diapers and Downy, because those are the two that I could come up with. So at the time when Procter & Gamble, Pampers is one of their large brands, and historically, you'll see that this kind of focuses on, as we look at visual packaging, thinking about who are we marketing to. So you'll see the one on your left is more so focused. There's a white baby on the cover, and that's pretty much what they use to kind of drive their market. And that was the way in which they thought about it. What you'll see on the left is what currently exists in terms of the visual for their product. Okay, so when I was working with P&G at the time, and we were in the process of relaunching Downy. So I think I'm gonna switch and then come back to that. So this was Downy in the early 90s, and I remember being in a brand meeting. So I'm like, I think I've been with the company for all of maybe a year and a half. I've been promoted, so it's probably in a year and a half. We were in a brand meeting in Philadelphia, and I remember they were talking to us some new configuration of Downy. So they would come and talk to us about it. And I asked, have you all ever given consideration to the visual that's on the packaging in terms of how you might diversify it or offer something different? And at the time, I didn't compare Snuggle. So anybody ever use Snuggle? Do y'all probably don't know it? Do y'all use fabric softener? No, just get it clean. Okay. So fabric softener, in addition to what we, to Tide or to Cheer, fabric softener kind of goes in. Supposedly it keeps your clothes from having static cling. You may bounce sheets, maybe. But I asked the question, and I remember thinking, I'm too young for them to fire me over this question. And it was an interesting thing where, the like blank look on their face when I asked the question. I'm probably thinking my marketing manager probably said, oh, I can't believe she just asked that question. But it was a very valid question. And their response to me, what do you think their response was? Take a guess. Why they keep it that way and don't change it? Yes.
It's always been that way.
It's always been that way. Yes, it's always been that way. And there's brand recognition, right? So when people thought of Downy, that's what they thought of. And I thought, that's interesting in 1993. But thinking through the transit of where we were headed, reaching a broader audience, we had a heavy Hispanic market that we were really starting to thrive in, and the focus was on, that's the way it's always been. Okay, so now what you see next to you, I Googled it today, and I knew that it looked different. Now, do you see some differences between the way that those two girls, still skin tone, but she has dark hair, which might give you, she could look like she was Latinx, maybe, right? So then now let's go look at my daughter, and this is what I'll never forget, and I made some choices at that time. My daughter was 2, and we were in Target in New Jersey, and she was in pull-ups. And we were walking down the pull-ups aisle, and she said, Mommy, that little girl looks just like me. Now mind you, pull-ups was our competition. Huggies makes, so one of the things you learn if you work in a company like that, speaking the name of the competitor is like the devil. Like, you do not do that. Nor do you ever consider buying their products. Guess what I bought that day? I bought pull-ups. And I continued to buy pull-ups until she was out. Because for my child to look at a product and say, wow, that girl looks like me, versus that's what our pull-ups look like. So this is Huggies, this is us. And that's what they look like. Now, today, and I'll go back to, at that time, and I think it's interesting, they kind of figured out, maybe we might want to change this. This is what it looks like. Pampers Easy Ups now, and they're like, when I pulled it up, they've got like 5 different visual images, 4 different ethnic groups that are on the packages. And now what they do is it depends on the size. So each of the different sizes has a different child of a different racial ethnic background. So what does that do for P&G? What do you think it does for them? Having that type of access. As you walk down the aisle, and I'm sure y'all hang out in the Pampers aisle on a regular basis. So when you walk down an aisle, if you're a family or a mom or a dad buying diapers, or with your child, and you see all these different things, what does that tell you? What might that do to you? Yes.
It shows diversity.
It shows diversity, and it gives you more options, right? And it reaches a broader audience. At the end of the day, it shows diversity, but it reaches a broader audience. And that's one of the things that they have gotten, and they are masterful at having solid brands that they can develop solid messaging that meets the consumer need, but it also understands who's their target audience, and how are they reaching that consumer.